My name is Eleanor Vance, and for the first 28 years of my life, I believed that love was something to be earned, like a grade or a promotion. I live in Portland, Oregon, a city of soft rain and evergreen-scented air, in a small but meticulously kept apartment in the Laurelhurst neighborhood. My windows overlook a canopy of maple trees that turn a brilliant, fiery gold in the autumn. I work as an archivist for Conrad and Finch Historical Preservation, a quiet job that suits my temperament. I spend my days surrounded by the ghosts of the past, fading photographs, brittle letters, and architectural blueprints of buildings long since gone. I find a certain peace in preserving stories that might otherwise be forgotten. It is, perhaps, a subconscious attempt to give others the permanence I always felt I lacked in my own family story. Growing up in our modest two-story home in the suburbs of Beaverton, the narrative was always clear. There were two children. Leo, my younger brother, was the sun. I was the shade he was cast in. It wasn't a malicious or overtly cruel dynamic, but rather a quiet, persistent current that ran through the bedrock of our family. Love for Leo was a public spectacle, a vibrant, overflowing fountain. For me, it was a slow, rationed drip, meant to sustain but never to nourish. I remember my 9th birthday. My mother, Helen, baked a simple vanilla cake, its top slightly lopsided. My father, Richard, gave me a firm hug and a gift card to Powell's City of Books. It was a thoughtful gift, and I was grateful. But I also remember Leo's 7th birthday that same year. Our backyard was transformed into a miniature wonderland. There was a bouncy castle shaped like a dragon, a hired magician who pulled a real rabbit from a hat, and a cotton candy machine that spun fragrant pink clouds into the air. Friends and neighbors filled the lawn, their laughter echoing through the summer afternoon. I watched from the upstairs window, my nose pressed against the cool glass, tracing the patterns of condensation my breath made. I wasn't sad, not exactly. I was just observing. I was learning the fundamental equation of our family. Leo's joy was a community project. Mine was a private, quiet affair. This pattern followed us through school. When I brought home a report card with straight A's, my father would glance at it, give a curt nod, and say, "Good work, Eleanor. That's what we expect from you." It was an acknowledgement of a fulfilled duty, not a celebration of an achievement. But when Leo came home with a C+ in algebra, a subject he'd struggled with all semester, it was cause for a celebratory pizza night. My mother would post proudly on social media about his perseverance, his fighting spirit. I learned early on to become self-sufficient, a closed loop of effort and reward. I joined the debate team, became editor of the school paper, and won a state-level essay competition. Each achievement was a brick I laid in the foundation of my own self-worth, a structure built in a quiet corner of my life where my parents rarely visited. I called home from my dorm room at the University of Oregon one crisp autumn evening, the scent of rain on pavement drifting through my open window. My voice was buzzing with excitement. I got the lead research position at the Knight Library Archives. I told them, proud of landing such a competitive on-campus job. "That's wonderful, dear." My mother's voice came through the line, distracted. "Listen, did I tell you? Leo's band, Wandering Echo, just booked their first real gig at the Crystal Ballroom. Can you believe it? Opening for a local headliner." The line went quiet as I absorbed the shift in energy. My achievement was a pebble dropped in a pond. His was a firework. I learned to swallow my news, to keep my victories small and private. Meanwhile, Leo drifted. He changed his major from business to philosophy to, for a brief, bewildering period, environmental science. He took a sabbatical year to travel through Southeast Asia on our parents' dime, a journey meant to help him find his creative center. He came back with a tattoo of a lotus flower and no clearer sense of direction. I, on the other hand, juggled a double major in history and art preservation, worked 2 jobs, and navigated the city's bus system in the pouring rain to get to my unpaid internship. The unspoken truth settled deep in my bones. No matter how high I climbed, I would never reach the pedestal they had built for Leo. I wasn't their project. I was their proof of concept, a finished product they could point to as evidence of good parenting while they focused their real energy on the masterpiece still in progress. When I graduated magna cum laude, I used my savings to buy a sensible used car and put a down payment on my apartment. At 27, I was debt-free and professionally stable. I invited my parents over for a housewarming, hoping, with a foolish, persistent ache, that this tangible proof of my success would finally elicit the one thing I craved: pride. My father walked through my small living room, his eyes scanning the carefully chosen furniture and framed prints. "Very nice, Eleanor," he said, his tone casual. "Practical." My mother hugged me, her perfume familiar and comforting. "We never worry about you, sweetie," she said, and I felt my heart sink. "You've always been able to take care of yourself. You just don't need us the way Leo does." It was meant as a compliment, but it landed like a verdict. I was being sentenced to a lifetime of capability. My strength wasn't a virtue, it was a release from their obligation. What hurt wasn't the car they bought Leo after he crashed his first one, or the monthly checks they sent to support his fledgling coffee roasting venture. It was the space they took from me, my space in their hearts, my right to be seen as someone who might, just once in a while, need them too. So, when I walked into the hushed, wood-paneled conference room at Hawthorne and Associates for the reading of my grandfather's will, I wasn't expecting a windfall. I wasn't even hoping for a grand gesture. I just wanted a single, validating sentence in the story of our family, a footnote that said, "Eleanor was here, and she mattered." I didn't yet know that my parents were prepared to rip out that page entirely. But I also didn't know that my grandfather and my grandmother had laminated it in steel. Grandpa Arthur's passing was a quiet affair, much like the man himself. He was the steady, gentle anchor of my life, the one person whose love felt unconditional and uncomplicated. While my parents saw my independence as a convenience, Grandpa Arthur saw it as a strength to be nurtured. He was the one who drove 4 hours to attend my graduate thesis presentation, sitting in the front row, his gaze fixed on me with a quiet, powerful focus. When I was finished, he didn't offer effusive praise. He simply took my hand in his large, warm one and said, "You have a gift for finding the soul in forgotten things, Eleanor. Never lose that." The funeral was a blur of muted colors and hushed whispers. My parents flanked Leo, their hands a constant, reassuring presence on his shoulders. He looked lost, his usual charm dimmed by grief. I sat one row behind them, a solitary island. When I delivered a short eulogy, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, I spoke of how Grandpa Arthur used to send me postcards from his travels, each one with a simple, hand-drawn sketch of a bird he'd seen. My mother looked at me with a faintly puzzled expression, as if this was a detail of her father's life she'd never known. It probably was. 2 weeks later, the crisp, cream-colored envelope arrived from Hawthorne and Associates. The reading was scheduled for the following Friday. My name was listed among the beneficiaries. A small, fragile hope fluttered in my chest. Perhaps he had left me his collection of antique maps or his favorite worn armchair. Something to remember him by. The day before the reading, another envelope appeared in my mailbox. The handwriting was my grandmother Clara's elegant, familiar script. She had been a quiet presence since the funeral, her grief a deep, calm ocean. I opened it carefully. The note inside was brief. "Dearest Eleanor, it is very important that you are at the reading tomorrow. Your grandfather made his wishes exceptionally clear. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. He saw you. Always. With love. Grandma Clara." The words sent a shiver through me. There was a current of warning beneath their gentle surface. Grandma Clara was a woman of immense grace and quiet strength, but she was not one for melodrama or interference. This note was a flare, a signal sent across troubled waters, and it told me I needed to be prepared for a storm. I took the day off work, choosing my most professional outfit, a simple navy blue dress and a structured blazer. It felt like armor. As I walked into the law office, the scent of old paper and lemon polish filling the air, I saw my parents sitting beside Leo. My father glanced up, saw me, and I caught the subtle, knowing look he exchanged with my mother. A small, tight smirk touched his lips. It was the look of a man who held all the cards. Leo gave me a small, hesitant wave. I nodded back, my stomach churning. We hadn't spoken properly in weeks. I took a seat across the polished mahogany table from them. Mr. Hawthorne, a kind-faced man with silver hair, shuffled his papers. The room settled into a heavy silence. He began to read. The will was straightforward at first. The main estate, the house and savings, was divided between his children, my mother, and her brother. Then came the grandchildren. Mr. Hawthorne cleared his throat. To my beloved grandchildren, Eleanor Vance and Leo Vance, I bequeath the contents of the Vance Progeny Trust to be divided into 2 equal shares. I saw it then, a flicker of tension in my father's jaw, a tightening around my mother's eyes. This was the moment they had been waiting for. My father cleared his throat, holding up a hand to stop Mr. Hawthorne. "Excuse me," he began, his voice smooth and authoritative. "On that point, Helen and I will be accepting Eleanor's portion on her behalf." Mr. Hawthorne paused, his eyebrows raising slightly. I felt the air leave my lungs. The room was utterly silent, every eye on me. My father continued, a magnanimous smile on his face. "Eleanor has never been much concerned with finances. She's very self-sufficient. We feel, and we're sure she'll agree, that this inheritance would be best directed toward Leo's business venture. A way for Arthur's legacy to grow, to build something new." My mother chimed in, her voice soft and sweet as honey. "Eleanor has always been so generous. We know she'd want to support her brother. He's the visionary in the family, after all." I stared at them, my mind reeling. They were erasing me, right here, in front of everyone, painting me as a benevolent, disinterested saint while they handed my legacy to my brother. I opened my mouth, a choked protest forming on my lips, but another voice cut through the silence, calm and clear as a bell. "I think," said Grandma Clara, rising slowly from her chair at the head of the table, "that we should allow Mr. Hawthorne to finish reading the entire document first." Her gaze wasn't fixed on my parents, but on the lawyer. It was a simple statement, yet it landed with the force of a gavel. The confidence in my father's posture faltered for a second. The room held its breath. Something had just shifted, and in that moment, I knew my grandmother had not come here to spectate. She had come to officiate. Mr. Hawthorne gave Grandma Clara a respectful nod and turned back to the document. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension. As he continued to detail the trust, a sum of $150,000 for each of us, my parents' discomfort became a palpable presence at the table. My father, unable to restrain himself, interrupted again, his tone losing its earlier smoothness and taking on a sharper, more insistent edge. "Let's be practical here," he said, his gaze sweeping the room as if to gather allies. "Eleanor is established. She has a career, her own apartment, no dependents. She's fine. Leo, on the other hand, is on the cusp of something great. He's building a brand, creating jobs." Grandpa Arthur was a practical man. He would have wanted his money to be an investment, not a redundancy. He chuckled, a dry, hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. My mother, ever the gentle hammer, added, "And it's what a family does. We support the one who needs it most. Eleanor has never been materialistic. I'm sure, deep down, she knows this is the right thing to do. Meaningful. Materialistic. Right." The words spun in my head. Leo's meaningful project hadn't turned a profit in the 2 years since its inception. He hadn't held a steady job since college. I felt a slow burn of anger begin to thaw the ice in my veins. I looked at my brother, who was staring intently at a knot in the wooden table, his face pale. He was a silent passenger in a vehicle my parents were driving right over me. I placed my hands flat on the table, grounding myself. "I don't need anyone to accept anything on my behalf," I said. My voice came out low and even, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. My father's head snapped toward me, his mask of paternal concern slipping to reveal the raw irritation beneath. "Eleanor, this isn't about you," he snapped. "This is about what's best for the family as a whole. Don't let stubbornness get in the way of generosity, sweetie," my mother added, her smile now strained. Generosity? No, this was a demand for my disappearance. This was the culmination of a lifetime of being told to be quiet, to be strong, to make room for my brother. And I was done. I am not giving up what Grandpa Arthur left for me, I said, my gaze unwavering. The lawyer cleared his throat, bringing a welcome dose of legal reality to the emotional battlefield. Mrs. Vance is correct. Legally, the terms are explicit. The inheritance is designated for Eleanor, unless she signs a formal waiver. We'll handle that, my father cut in, his jaw tight with fury. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might lose his temper completely. Instead, he did something far more insidious. He began to weaponize my past. We paid for your braces, Eleanor, he began, his voice taking on a wounded, righteous tone. We gave you a roof over your head. We helped with your tuition that first year before your scholarships kicked in. We have supported you. Each statement was a stone, meant to build a wall of guilt around me. After everything we've done for you, you owe us this. You owe your family. If you truly loved us, my mother whispered, her eyes welling with strategic tears, you wouldn't make this so difficult. My own voice was gone, trapped somewhere in my constricted throat. The weight of their expectations, their revisionist history, was crushing. Then, under the table, I felt a gentle, warm hand cover mine. I looked up and met my grandmother's eyes. They were clear, kind, and full of a wisdom that saw through every layer of manipulation. You don't owe them a thing, Eleanor, she whispered, her voice for my ears only. And your grandfather knew it. In that instant, the fog of guilt and obligation began to clear. This was never about the money. It was about my right to exist, to take up space, to be seen as an equal. It was about honoring the one man who had always seen me, and I would not let his final gift be twisted into another sacrifice on the altar of Leo. I was not going to shrink again. The aftermath of the will reading was a swift and brutal storm. My parents departed the law office in a flurry of icy glares and muttered accusations of betrayal. Leo trailed behind them, a silent, grim-faced shadow. I remained in my chair long after the room had emptied, the echo of my name and my inheritance, Eleanor Vance, one equal share, resonating in the quiet space. It was the sound of fairness, a concept that had always felt foreign in the context of my family. By the time I returned to the quiet sanctuary of my apartment, my phone had become a vessel of their fury. A text from my mother, I can't believe you would embarrass us like that. I hope the money was worth it. Followed by one from my father, enjoy your inheritance. You've made it perfectly clear where your loyalties lie. And then, the one that landed with the heaviest blow, from Leo, I never asked for any of this, Elle. His words stung because they were true, but also because they were an abdication of his own role. He hadn't asked for it, but he had stood by silently and let it happen. I didn't sleep that night. I paced the length of my small living room, the city lights of Portland painting shifting patterns on the walls. The silence was deafening. A younger version of me, a small girl still watching from a window, cried out inside, wanting to apologize, to smooth things over, to do anything to get back in their good graces. But the woman I had become, the archivist who understood the importance of preserving the truth, knew that some things, once broken, cannot be mended with apologies. They can only be understood. After 3 days of radio silence, I knew I needed to escape. I called my boss at Conrad and Finch, my voice more fragile than I wanted it to be, and requested a week of personal time. He agreed without question. I turned off my phone, packed a small bag, and drove west, away from the city and toward the coast. The drive itself was a balm. The further I got from Portland, the more the dense urban landscape gave way to towering Douglas firs and the vast, moody expanse of the Pacific. I was heading to my grandparents' cottage in Manzanita, a small, cedar-shingled house nestled in a grove of shore pines, just a short walk from the ocean. It was the place Grandpa Arthur had taught me to identify constellations, and where Grandma Clara had taught me the secret to her famous blackberry pie. The cottage greeted me with the familiar creak of its weathered porch steps. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of salt, old wood, and the faint, lingering scent of my grandfather's pipe tobacco. Dust motes danced in the slivers of afternoon light slanting through the windows. It was a space saturated with love and memory. I built a fire in the old stone fireplace, wrapped myself in a thick, hand-knitted afghan, and finally let myself grieve. The tears were not just for my grandfather. They were for the little girl who had learned to be invisible, for the young woman who had fought so hard for an approval that was never coming. It was a silent, long overdue catharsis. The next morning, while looking for an extra blanket in the guest room closet, my fingers brushed against a small, unfamiliar wooden box. Tucked inside was a thick, sealed envelope with my name written on it in my grandfather's strong, steady hand. My heart hammered against my ribs as I sank onto the floor and carefully broke the seal. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the will has been read. I imagine your father and mother have already made things complicated. I am writing this because I need you to know that nothing you experienced was your imagination. I saw it all, my dear girl. I saw the way your accomplishments were treated as expectations and Leo's stumbles were treated as heroic struggles. I saw them hand him the world and tell you to be strong enough to build your own. You were never invisible to me. Your quiet strength, your thoughtful heart, your integrity, I saw it all. This inheritance is not a prize. It is not a reward. It is a tool. A foundation. I didn't give it to you because I thought you were in desperate need of it. I gave it to you because you earned it. Every single day you chose to persevere when no one else was applauding. You earned it with every late night of studying. Every quiet victory you kept to yourself. Your voice is a precious thing, Eleanor. Do not let them silence it ever again. Use this gift to build a life so full and true that their opinions become nothing more than a distant echo. Know that you were and are deeply loved. Always, Grandpa Arthur. I read the letter 3 times, the paper trembling in my hands. The words were a healing balm on a wound I hadn't realized was still so raw. It wasn't about the $150,000. It was about this testament. This validation from the one person whose opinion I valued above all others. He had seen me. He had understood. And now, holding his words in my hands, I felt a new kind of strength take root within me. I had a choice. I could retreat back into the comfortable silence I had known for so long, or I could stand in the truth he had so lovingly preserved for me. I returned from the coast feeling as though a fundamental part of my internal landscape had shifted. The letter from Grandpa Arthur was a warm, solid presence in my bag, a touchstone of truth. The first thing I did when I got back to my apartment was call my grandmother. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm and steady. "You found his letter, didn't you?" she asked, her tone gentle. "Yes," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "Grandma, thank you." "Oh, my dear, it was all your grandfather," she said softly. "He wanted you to know that while love can sometimes be quiet, it should never be invisible. He was so incredibly proud of the woman you've become." It was then that she told me the rest of the story. Months before he passed, my parents had visited him, making a concerted effort to persuade him to change the will. They had used the same arguments I'd heard in the lawyer's office, that Leo's need was greater, that I was fine on my own. They had even gone so far as to suggest that Leo be made the sole beneficiary of the grandchildren's trust. Grandpa Arthur had not only refused, but their attempt had spurred him to action. With the quiet help of Mr. Hawthorne and Grandma Clara, he had added a specific, legally binding clause to the will. She called it the Protective Covenant. It stated that any beneficiary who actively attempted to contest or redirect the designated inheritance of another would, by that very act, forfeit their own share of the estate. It was a failsafe, a quiet, powerful piece of legal armor he had forged for me. "Your parents triggered that clause the moment your father spoke up at the reading," Grandma Clara explained. "They pushed too hard, and they have lost their portion of the inheritance. Mr. Hawthorne has already informed them." I sank onto my sofa stunned. What was their reaction? "Rage," she said simply. "They are blaming you, of course. Saying you somehow manipulated your grandfather. We've also had to remove your father as executor of the estate. It will be managed by the firm and myself now. It's exactly what Arthur wanted, in case things turned ugly." For the first time in my life, I felt the full, protective weight of my family's love, not from my parents, but from my grandparents. They hadn't just offered words of support, they had anticipated the battle and built a fortress for me. The final confrontation came that evening. A sharp, insistent knock echoed through my apartment. I opened the door to find my parents on my doorstep. My mother's face was tear-streaked, her makeup smudged. My father's was a rigid mask of fury. "You planned this," he spat, his voice low and venomous. "You and Clara, you conspired against us." I stood my ground, my grandfather's words echoing in my heart. "Grandpa made his own choices," I said, my voice calm. "And you made yours. Don't do this to us, Eleanor," my mother pleaded, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. "Just sign your share over to Leo. We can still fix this. He needs it." The old guilt tried to surface, the familiar urge to placate them, to make it all go away. But something new and solid held it back. "No," I said, the word clear and final. "For 20 years, I needed a family that saw me. I never got one. I'm not setting myself on fire to keep you warm anymore." They stared at me, shocked into silence. Then a bitter, cruel laugh escaped my father's lips. "Fine," he said, his eyes cold as ice. "I hope the money keeps you warm at night. Because as of this moment, you don't have a family anymore." They turned and walked away, the sound of their footsteps fading down the hall. And as the door clicked shut, I felt not devastation, but a strange, quiet sense of release. I hadn't lost a family. I had lost the illusion of one. In their place, I had finally, fully, found myself. The silence that followed their departure was profound, but it was no longer a lonely silence. It was a space of peace, a quiet room I could furnish with my own thoughts, my own feelings. The angry text ceased. My parents and their expectations were gone. In their absence, a new kind of support system bloomed. Grandma Clara called every day. My friends rallied around me, bringing wine and takeout and offering shoulders to lean on. A week later, there was another knock on my door. I peered through the peephole and saw Leo. He was alone, his shoulders slumped, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. He looked younger than his 25 years and utterly lost. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I stepped aside, and he walked into my living room, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. He didn't sit, but stood awkwardly in the center of the rug. "I didn't know they were going to do that, Elle," he said, his eyes fixed on the floor. "At the reading. I swear." "But you didn't stop them," I replied, not with accusation, but with a simple statement of fact. He flinched. "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "I should have. I was a coward." He slowly pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. It was a letter, written in Grandpa's familiar script. "Grandma gave me this. He wrote one to me, too." He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "It wasn't like yours. It wasn't a comfort. It was a wake-up call." He told me what it said. Grandpa Arthur had written about the danger of a life lived without effort, about the gilded cage our parents had built for him. He wrote that being the golden boy was its own kind of prison, one that robbed him of the chance to build a true sense of self. The final line, Leo told me, was a challenge. "Stop letting other people fight your battles and build your future. Grow up, son. It's time." "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," he said, finally meeting my gaze. "For everything. For every time I let them put you in the shade so I could have the sun. I knew it was happening. It was easier to let it." It was the apology I never thought I'd hear. Not an excuse, but a confession. A start. We sat on my couch and talked for hours, for the first time as equals. We talked about the birthday parties and the report cards, the way he was coddled and I was conditioned. He admitted that my self-sufficiency, the very thing our parents used as a reason to dismiss me, was the thing he envied most. "I'm 25 years old, and I don't know how to do anything on my own," he confessed, his voice raw. "You built all of this, brick by brick. I don't even know where the quarry is." Then he told me his plan. "I'm using my inheritance to go to Portland Community College," he said, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I'm going to get a degree in business management. I want to learn how to make the coffee company work for real. On my own." A genuine smile spread across my face. It wasn't just a plan, it was a promise. A break in the cycle. "Grandpa would be so proud of that," I said softly. "I know," he nodded. And for the first time since we were small children, we hugged. It wasn't the awkward, obligatory hug of family gatherings. It was real. Something new and fragile, but earned. It has been a year since the will reading. My parents still do not speak to me. They cut Leo off financially and emotionally after he refused to side with them against me and Grandma Clara. He says it's the hardest and best thing that has ever happened to him. As for me, I'm learning to live in the space I've claimed. With a portion of my inheritance, I established the Arthur Vance Grant, a small fund administered through my firm to help young students pursue careers in historical preservation. It feels like the most fitting way to honor his legacy. I'm in therapy, untangling the complicated knots of my past, learning to mother the little girl inside me who was told she didn't need it. Leo is thriving. He sends me pictures of his textbooks and boasts about his grades. We have a new tradition. Every Sunday morning, we meet at a little cafe in his neighborhood called the Daily Grind. We drink coffee, his own blend, which is actually quite good, and we talk. We are, slowly and carefully, building the sibling relationship we were never allowed to have. Grandma Clara, our steadfast anchor, sometimes joins us, her eyes sparkling with a quiet pride. "You two are rewriting the story," she often says. "Don't you ever stop." She's right. Family, I've learned, is not just about blood. It's about who sees you, who stands for you, who gives you the space to grow. For years, I believed love meant shrinking myself to keep the peace. Now I know that true love and true self-respect is about having the courage to take up your rightful space in the world. I didn't just inherit a sum of money from my grandfather. I inherited my voice. And I am finally learning how to use it.